Hey, y'all, welcome back to the Spiritual Fitness Growth Self podcast. My name is Phil, and I am here to present to you another conversation for your weekly spiritual fitness regiment. My conversation is with my friend Mitch, who reflects on a pretty serious life-changing experience that he went through, and we just unpack the spiritual fitness elements in that conversation. Tune in for a great lesson on how you have meaning, purpose, and community, the core elements of spirituality within your life at all times. And with just a little bit of reflection, you can realize that they're there yourself. And it's always a good reminder that you never know when the chaos of nature is going to strike, so it's best to have that spiritual fitness built up before the rain begins. So that's it. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
So I will
Is this your
say, like, listening to some of your past guests, I just hope people are as interested in what I have to say because I don't have a lot of interesting things to say.
Well, just wait till I start asking questions. Why would you say that you don't have interesting stuff to say?
I mean, I live a fairly boring life. I say that, but like honestly, it's pretty hectic recently with the newborn daughter and uh, uh, taking time off and Morgan's uh, taking a year off from work too. So we got a lot going on actually. So I say boring, but really it's just like, home life.
I mean, honestly, man, think about where you were just a year ago, or even, and then where you are now. Like, what were you doing last December 3rd?
That's a good question. Probably working, honestly, and like probably working fairly late hours because like this would have been the busy time and like, very thankful that my work gives me time off, but for my child, but yeah, I would be grinding at work at this time last year.
Geez, so you went from like going 1,000 miles an hour, working 70 hours a week, to you're just off and you're providing for that. I can hear your kid in the background.
Oh, sorry, yeah, she's a feisty one, and it's a good thing considering how everything started out. Like uh, pretty hectic. But yeah, she's a fighter for sure, and I feel bad because Morgan's probably freaking out at the moment, but it's all good.
Did you at least inform your wife that you'd be doing a podcast for your friend Phil?
Oh, it was put on the shared calendar. Very important thing in a relationship because that's how we know what's going on.
Oh man, I made it to the shared calendar. That means a lot, Mitch. Thank you.
Hey, anytime, anytime.
Yeah, so wait, for real, what's it been like going like being forced to slow down and have a complete change of pace?
It's it was hard at the beginning. Like I've never been a kind of guy that has been able to fully disconnect from like work and stuff. Like obviously I've gone on vacation and I can enjoy myself, but I've always been the guy that's like deep in emails in the morning just to see like if I missed anything and like answering questions one off. And just completely disconnecting was really tough. Like those first couple days, particularly on this second stint of my leave. Um, when like now when I was there weren't any like health problems and Morgan was fully healed. Like that first morning, I'm just like, okay, well, what do I do? And then I hear my daughter crying, and I was like, oh, that's what I have to go do. So like I'm happiest when I'm busy, and like even though I don't really have a lot of free time, um, there's times where I'm just like, okay, well, what's the next thing to do? I put my daughter down. What do I do next? So it's been tough for sure.
Mm-hmm. The like the constant movement where like you just feel like you're like sort of chronically in this state of vigilance, trying to get through one thing to the next. I mean, that sounds a lot like work, your like regular work life. You're just doing it with a baby.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And yeah, I mean, it's probably why I was driven to the career that I'm in, just because it's fast paced and I thrive in those environments. And like, even though it is nice to kind of take a break every once in a while and take a deep breath and put your baby down and everything's kind of quiet, I'm always thinking of like what's that next thing I can go do. So, but yeah, it's it's yeah, a hectic life, but I like it.
Man, I mean, I say it myself, like I'd rather be busy than bored. If you give me way too much
Yes.
free time with way too much unstructured free time, like I decompensate quick.
Yep.
You can
Yep.
relate with that?
Very. I definitely relate to that. You said it. I'd rather be busy than bored. And then when I'm bored, my first thing is like, okay, well, then I need to go find something else to do. And
Mm.
I find I connect that a lot to like a lot of things in my life, work, like social life, like all that. Like if I get bored, I'm just looking for the next thing. So
Where do you think that comes from?
that's a that's a good question.
Because like I struggle with it too. Just to be like, I'm totally in the boat with you, man. It is something that I've known about myself, and I've been pretty aware of it enough to know that like, okay, I need to find my things, and okay, this is going to be something where I have long periods of unstructured time, so I should prepare for it so that I make good choices or be productive with it. But I still, I haven't figured out for myself like why I'm like that or what the underlying root cause is. What about you?
For me, without getting like too like deep in like, psychology of myself and revealing too much about myself, like my parents are fairly like isolated people. They're very, very introverted, and that was never me growing up. Like I always wanted to be out and doing things. But they were not those people. They liked their home life, and they liked, having kids at home. So the compromise to that wasn't like, oh, sometimes going out and doing things. It was me being home trying to find things to entertain myself. And like I wouldn't have traded my childhood for anything. But for me, that's where I kind of feel like when you're like thriving and like trying to find like companionship and going like you want to go do things with people and you're just forced to do things at home, you get bored. And so you try to find as many things you can do to entertain yourself when you're bored at home. So I feel like that's just kind of followed me in my entire life. And like I said, a social life, my career. When I get bored, like I said, it's on to the next thing. What can I do to um, that's interesting and fun. So
Mm-hmm. I get that. Yeah, the constant move of just sort of, I guess it's just kind of like who we are and
mhm.
what came out of the box and it works for you. The connection I'm thinking about with spiritual fitness is one of those ideas about like knowing your sense of purpose in life and the kind of, that's the sort of the things that drive you. And
Mhm.
then when those purposes are either threatened or when they change, then that's typically when the most distress occurs. Um, like in your situation, Mitch, you're saying how you went from like basically full time professional to full time dad, and that's a big purpose change. What would you say is the big? How would you describe that change?
uh, Chaotic. And like you said, there was a lot of like chaos, like just with that how that all that happened. Not just to me, but like to my family and to my wife. The biggest thing was like you find out your wife's pregnant. You kind of start putting together a plan. Like, okay, well, 9 months out is means this is kind of what we're thinking. And then for my job, I'm very grateful they gave me 16 weeks that I'd have to split it between um, two sections. So it was like, okay, well, I'm going to take the first section for these dates, and then I'm going to go back for a couple months and take the next sections. Well, like uh, as you probably know, like pregnancy, like there's curveballs thrown at you. You don't things happen earlier than expected. We ended up in the hospital, much earlier. My daughter was in the NICU for about a month and a half. So like all those plans were like just thrown completely out the door.
Mm,
Like you said, going from thinking I was going to be just working, having a normal work day, to going to the hospital, and then going to and from the hospital every day for a month and a half to, be with my daughter, making sure my wife was recovering well. It was chaotic. There were times where I would wake up at 3 a.m. and just go for a run because I didn't know what else to do. Like I, uh, it just felt like I needed to go do something that wasn't driving to the hospital. And you feel terrible for things like that too. You're like, oh, I don't want to go to the hospital today. But because you want to spend time with your daughter and your family, but like I didn't know what to do with myself, and it was hard when your routine is just blown up like that. So yeah, chaotic is what I would say.
Geez, Mitch, as you're talking, the one word that pops up in my mind is just like you were surviving. Just
Pure survival mode. Definitely agree.
100%. I'm sure the days kind of blended into each other. And like, what's it like looking back at it now? Especially like you said, after that first morning where you woke up and it was just you heard your babies cry and you're like, oh, this is what I do. So that was your first day of normal. Much later. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, you said like the word like time was a blur. There wasn't like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, days of the week. It was wake up, go to the hospital, spend time there, come home, do what we could to decompress, wake up, go do it again. Like looking back, that could have added like just how time felt. That could have been the month and a half it was. It could have been a week. It could have been like 6 months. Like there was no like uh, time reference there. Um,
Mhm.
and then, like you said, that first day of normal was, close to 2 months after my daughter was born, um, which was, right after she got out of the NICU. And then I went back to work because that's when I was supposed to go, back to work after my first stint of leave. So like my first day of normal was waking up, hearing my daughter crying, being like, okay, this is what I need to go take care of. And then I went to work, and that was 2 months. And then luckily, again, have gotten to take another set of leave. So now it's just day in day out dad mode, and it's I look at 2024, and here we are on December 3rd, and it's gone by crazy fast. But at the same time, I would not I would not turn time back to relive it because it was exhausting both physically and emotionally.
I wouldn't turn back time to relive it. Yeah, who would want to? Who would? If you
Yeah,
could turn back time and talk to previous Mitch to coach him, to give him some, hey, heads up, here's some advice or whatever, what would you tell your former self just before the birth happened and the roller coaster really began?
I would say like I mean, there's the saying that what happens with best laid plans. Like I would just say like plan for the unexpected. Plan that like you're gonna have to learn um, to to be flexible. And I'm a very like directive person. I'd make plans, and that's what I do. Like sometimes things change, but like they're usually foreseeable. I would just kind of let him know like, hey, like plan that things are gonna fail, things aren't gonna go the way they planned, and just take a deep breath, because I feel like there were a lot of times where if I just took a deep breath, I would have realized, things are okay, um, everybody's healthy, but when it's all going on, like it's a blur.
Mm. uh, are you sort of pointing at like how like when it was just like in the depths of the shit of that moment
Hmm.
where like the anxiety is super peak high, so like you're focusing on what you can't control and worrying about the future and thinking about the worst possible outcome and like really feeling the stress where like you can feel it in your chest and your throat, like those moments when you're like, hey Mitch, take
Ex
a take a breath.
exactly, because in my normal life, and I know I connect things to work a lot. Like when those things happen at work, my first thing is like, okay, well, what can I do to fix it? If something's going wrong, usually it's something that's in my control. And when things are completely out of your control and you're, trusting the phenomenal nurses and doctors and and experts to do their thing, but things aren't going the way that they say that they were going to go. I was trying to take control of things, and like there were some times where I may have said some words to a doctor that I would have rather not have said because of that feeling of anxiety and the thing like that I didn't have the grasp of being able to control things. But yeah, it was if I were to go back, that like I said, the advice would just be to kind of take a deep breath and understand like not having everything in your control isn't always the worst thing, and like there are people out there that are going to be able to take care of things. So
Man, this is so spiritual. This is awesome. Just like really hitting all the nails on the head. And you said your life was boring and you had nothing good to talk about. You liar. Things that
I like plot twists.
That's right. There's your plan for the unexpected. The and that wonderful humility. The big stuff about it is like what I'm taking away. Um, the the biggest struggle I see people have in the hospital and my role as chaplain is exactly, Mitch, what you described. That coming to terms with the harsh reality that we can't control everything, that we're not able to fix every problem immediately, that the answer doesn't always come when we want it or how we want it, and the results are not always what we expect them to be. And that is a rude reminder, and people are reminded of it quite bluntly in a hospital medical setting, when the world typically can trick us into thinking that it's the opposite, like with work and with tasks and with problems externally. But the medical world is a brutal reminder of sort of in my opinion, like the facade that we have of what we can and can't control.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
So then the big like reflection question, I guess, going back to this idea of like what would you do to tell Mitch as he was there, you said take a deep breath and also prepare for the unexpected, and which in my opinion sounds like give yourself some grace to accept your limits. But what would be some of the like superpowers that you realized that you had in your own survival skills? What came out within you in this immense pressure cooker of stress?
Oh, that's a good question. Really like, and it comes down to like something that even I've learned as, learning to be a father, just like you have a support system. It's not all on you. Uh, like at the beginning, like, my wife was recovering from giving birth to our child, and like it kind of felt like, okay, well, I need to take everything away from her, because she does need to recover, and that's just a fact, because childbirth is a incredibly straining both physically and mentally. Um, but once she was better, realizing like, okay, well, she's my support system. I can go talk to her about things. She can help figure things out for me. We can brainstorm off each other. Um, not just, and that's a big thing. Like you have a support system like within their own home, and then also taking it like outside of the house. Like my parents, since having my daughter, we've been coming closer than we have in the past few years because they live out in California and I'm here in Fort Worth. And her parents, who have been out multiple times, and her brother and my sister, and just kind of realizing that like I don't have to keep everything within the home. I can like use that support system. And I didn't mention, but all the friends and people who have been incredibly helpful. I'm lucky to have me and my wife are lucky to have friends who are in the medical field, who and great people who have podcasts who have offered to be ears and shoulders to lean on. So, but it just kind of realizing that like I can use that support system more than maybe I would have in the past, and then having to figure it out all myself.
And there it is, boom. So you talked about purpose, where your role as parent, your role as husband, your role as son, your role as friend, your role as employee. All these roles coming together, providing a lot of resiliency for you. The skills that you took from other parts of your life are applied in this setting, and then like right there, you're able to identify your community, your connection, or what allows you to feel connected, and you realize that you could tap into that system. So it's not only just something that you pour into, but it's one that pours into you too. And it sounds like to me that you're maybe for the first time able to really get a taste of what that's like to be poured into rather than just pouring out.
Yeah, and I think you said it very eloquently. Like this is it was one of the first times in kind of my lifetime where I didn't see like, oh, something hectic or crazy is going on in my life. I have to go figure it out because this is my problem. I'm not gonna, have other people worry about that. So it's definitely been a little bit of actually a big thing of growth for me, just realizing that there are people I can reach out to, and like, frankly, this community that I've built out, that me and my wife have built out, well, they want to help, and that was a big realization for me.
Mm, hmm The uh, the the causes of that block, that hurdle, that glass ceiling that people, and I include myself with you, put when it comes to withdrawing from the community. Not withdrawing as in leaving, but like if it's a bank account, you would make a withdrawal versus just deposits.
Hmm.
Is either A, it's a fear of being considered a burden in the group. B, it's a insecurity of wanting to try to like stay strong and I don't need help and I don't need anything. And if people think that I'm weak, then they'll push me out. So I have to stay strong in order to keep things up. C, it's a result of just a um, kind of trying to keep up the trust within the relationships, of being afraid that if I ask, then they'll say no, so I don't want to be rejected. Or D, kind of all of the above or things I didn't mention. Um, and what I love about that idea, though, is that all of them lead to the same answer, which is when you go through what you went through, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's this wonderful realization that it was all a lie. You are worthy, you are loved, and it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, you said it 100% correctly, and like all those things you listed, um, are things that, like, you know would kind of unintentionally go through my mind if I would have ever thought of like reaching out to somebody, and like kind of drawing on that string. Like, I've always seen myself, and I'm very aware that I'm a kind of a people pleaser. So you talked about it being like a bank account. I've always been the kind of guy that looks to be the putting deposits into that account for like other people. And I've always kind of, and like, I'm kind of realizing this now. I saw me trying to take a withdrawal from that account as like, oh, well, if I do this, then people won't come to me anymore, and then I can't be that person that people can rely on. Like, they're going to see me as somebody that needs help, when in reality, like, I wanted to be the person that's always helping. So, sorry, I just kind of word garbage to that, but like, it was something I was realizing while you were saying all those things. I was like, oh, that's a good way to think about it.
Mm, cool,
Yeah,
man. That's hey, good for you for having
yeah.
that like brain blast, man. I speak with it. I experience it myself, like this irony, this incredible irony of like I've got this servant's heart and I love to give to people, but I don't like it when people give to me because I don't want them to see me as the problem. But like you carry that through, and it's like, does that mean that like I'm giving to other people in order to make myself feel good about myself? I'm like, no, it's because I love them.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I have this conversation often, in the chaplaincy, especially with parents, who are like, I just don't want to be a burden on my family or my friends or my network. And I look at them and I say, if your friend or your brother or mom was in the same situation as you, what would you do? And they'd say, I'd buy them dinner and I'd take care of their kids and I'd help them out and I'd drop everything to be with them. And I'm like, okay, fine. So then quit fighting it and just accept it that people love you and that they want to help you. You get to be
Yeah, yeah,
selfish.
yeah. I definitely agree. And sometimes it just kind of takes that push to realize like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm either overthinking it or underthinking, what your place is in the world. And like you said, like just making that step to accepting that people love you is a pretty good first step. So
Hmm. And it's a choice too. People choose to love you, love me. And by allowing our community network to be part of our lives, uh, you're not forcing them to do anything ever. It's always a choice for them. It's their choice to say yes. It's their choice to say no, and they're along for the ride for as long as they want to. So it's up to us to give people the opportunity to love us in ways that they can, rather than hold it back, which is a hard thing to do.
definitely.
At least I think maybe it's harder maybe for men, maybe because like we don't typically talk about our problems as much with other men, or maybe it's just the industry. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about why that might be more common?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I could speak for men as a whole, but like
No, speak for men as
from
a whole, the entire male race. Speak for all
all
men,
right,
all mankind. Mitch,
this is
go.
how it is. Yeah, Mitch has set it into existence.
This will be the
No,
title of the podcast.
I'll definitely say like at least like my version of like either how I was grown brought up or
Grown up.
what yeah, grown up brought up, um and like kind of what I was taught like what a man is to be is like
Mm,
what we've talked about a lot is like not necessarily like hold everything in, but like definitely be less expressive. Like if you have an issue, like go figure it out. Um, uh, Frankly, like just be that person that fixes their own problems, and like that's how it always was in my house and a lot of the male adults that I grew up around. That's kind of just how things were. So I think
mm,
that's a little bit of it there. Just like in that in itself, like just breeds lack of communication about those things. Like
mhm.
you're not if you're always taught to go fix things yourself, you're never gonna go, oh well, I'm having this issue. Um, Help me figure out how I'm supposed to feel about it. No, I'm just gonna go fix it. I'm not gonna talk about it. Um,
Right.
and that's something I'd like. That's something I struggle with, like with my wife. I'm not the most emotionally expressive person.
Mm,
Um, so like that's something that I struggle with on a daily basis.
mm. Well, I kind of, just as a generic pushback against
Hmm.
what seems to be a more common thing against men from the emotional intelligence community, which is because men do not express their emotions in the same way that women do, or we do not generically um, experience or express emotions in the ways that people who are more on the emotional intelligence, reflective thinking do. That somehow that is a deficiency, and I kind of perceive it actually as the other side, which is we experience and express our emotions in a unique way, but let's not pathologize it. Let's not say that it's,
Hmm.
you need to learn how to speak and talk about your emotions, and we should be thinking about what happened in fourth grade and about how that's triggering you right now, and unpacking all your parent child trauma history and how it's affecting your choices today. Like, what good does that do? It's still not going to get you to get off the couch and go take care of your baby who's crying. What's going to do
Yep,
that is just the fact that you need to get off the freaking couch, um,
and go do it.
and go
Yeah.
do it. So that's where I say as a friend and as a spiritual fitness person, that's the idea of resiliency, is that we're not going to sit in our minds and just sort of unpack and think about it all day long. We're going to do something about it. And that's where it comes from. I mean, the purpose is the big doer side of things,
Hmm.
but all three of those meaning, purpose, and community, can be all those driving forces that, regardless of how you feel, regardless of your childhood, regardless of your future, it's going to be the thing that drives you through the fire, or even worse, like what you did, be in the fire, in the pressure cooker for 6 weeks in a NICU and still do it. Like,
Yep.
I mean, how much uh, contemplation upon your emotional experience was that going to change the fact that, your child's there and you're trying to figure things out? Would that have made things any better?
No, I mean that's 100% correct. Regardless of how I felt about it, and there were times where like I did not. Last thing I wanted to do was go to the NICU. It was something I needed to go do,
Hmm.
like, and that it gave me purpose, because that's something that like I would like getting my daughter healthy was like first step in her life, and now I have, the next rest of my life, for more things to discover and drive me and take care of her and grow my family. So I definitely agree with your point on that. Like nothing would have nothing no reflection of how I felt at the time would have changed how I approached it. Like from
Hmm.
a core belief is like this is something I need to go do regardless of how I feel about it.
Hmm. And it could have also been that sitting and maybe spending any more time reflecting on the emotional experience might have gotten even in the way of you being able to provide your role, because then you could have, what some people do is they get stuck in the whirlpool of their emotions, because then they get stuck in their feelings, and then
Hmm.
they miss the thing. You said that earlier, about that thought that crossed your mind of like, I really don't want to go to the NICU today, and then he still went regardless. And that is, if I that statement, I think, is such an honest, real thing to go through. That is I mean, I commend you for recognizing that, of like, I didn't want to do something, but I did it anyway. Um, there's a
Yeah,
lot with
and
that.
oh yeah, I was just gonna like express on that. Like it was something that like they had a little community of parents who were going through the same thing, going through the NICU at the same time, and they would have little get-togethers, and that was one thing that I remember kind of like bonding over some of those conversations with like you feel terrible for like having that feeling of like I don't want to go to the NICU where where my sick daughter is recovering, but I found like it was a common theme of just like you don't want to go to a place that's frankly depressing, where there are sick babies, some much sicker than yours, and there's loud noises and alarms and
No
but
privacy.
it no privacy, but it came down to like you know what you kind of mentioned before, like what's that driving factor? It was like, well, my daughter's there, I want to make sure she gets healthy, not just you know, for her benefit, but for my benefit. So like I can for the rest of my life know I did everything I could do to make sure she was healthy.
Hmm.
Because I know 10 years down the line, if I wouldn't have gone to the NICU one day or 2 days, like I would be like, well, why the hell was I not doing that? Like that
Hmm.
was such a terrible thing to not do. Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely it was a eye-opening experience. It's probably the easiest way to say that.
The easiest way to describe 6 weeks in the NICU. Easier said than done, my man. Easier said than done. You're, well, I would describe your experience from the spiritual fitness point of view, from your story that you're sharing, as like an awareness of your spiritual fitness. Not that saying that you weren't aware beforehand, but this is why I'm a big advocate for what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, because uh, anybody can have a NICU experience in their life, and it can happen at
Hmm.
any time in one's life. And here's the softball question: do you think the experience would have been easier or harder if you didn't have the community people in your life? Would it have been easier or harder if they weren't in your life?
It definitely would have been harder if they weren't in my life.
And why is that?
And like it would have been harder because well we kind of talked about those like the stress just bottles up and like you talked about getting stuck in the whirlwind of your emotions. I felt like if I didn't have that that community to kind of go to, and just at least have a shoulder to talk on, or friends reaching out, even if just to say like, hey, we're thinking about you, like nothing may not even come from that, but just that idea of like of a safety net. I feel like I may have gotten caught in my whirlwind of emotions, and I wouldn't have been able to have been that strong person for my wife when she was recovering, or
Hmm.
uh, and I just feel like it wouldn't have been it wasn't healthy to begin with, but it would have been even more unhealthy for my mental health to not have that community. And I'll tell you, like, being so far like physically from where I grew up and our families, that was tough in itself.
Mm.
Like just physical distance from some of those, key members of our community, that made it hard. But once you realize like it's only distance and it's only a 3 hour plane ride, like it's a lot easier to manage.
Mm-hmm. And then if you didn't have that sense of drive of getting out of bed, the purpose side of things, like if you didn't have that sort of purpose, how do you think things would have been different?
That's a good question too. Um,
Making you
well,
think.
yeah, you're making me think. Well, like from a life perspective, I don't even know how I would live if I didn't have that like kind of drive to get things done, because that's just who I am to a core, in like my professional life, my personal life. I always find something that's driving me to we talked about earlier, like the next thing to get done. If I didn't have that drive, I have no idea how I would live. I've never even thought about like not having that perspective on life, which is interesting to think about too. But I definitely, I can't even answer that question. I have no idea how it would have gone.
Mm. I mean, I'll take a few guesses. You probably wouldn't have had the job that you have that affords you the time off that you have, right?
Correct.
You know, that's one
That's
thing that
fair.
you mentioned is a key part of like who you are and like how you're able to do what you do is because it's who you are, that drive.
Hmm.
You probably would have stayed in bed and not gone to the hospital and taken more mental health days versus going to the hospital. Um, and then, you know, you also probably wouldn't have advocated for your daughter with the doctors the few times when you shared your few choice words. Um,
Yeah.
you know, so just from what you're telling me, there's three big things that would have been different. That's pretty big.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I definitely agree. And yeah, thanks for kind of unpacking that, because, like I said, I couldn't even think about that. That's just a key part of my personality, I think.
It is, I am. It is who I am. How can I not know what I am if I am what I am? Thinking of what I'm not is impossible, for I am. Well, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
And then
I appreciate it. Yeah.
the last one in the triad. So we talked about community, realizing like, yeah, uh, just doing it alone would have just absolutely sucked. And if you didn't have the same purpose, like, man, that would have also really, really sucked and could have completely changed how things are currently. And then the last one is then meaning. We didn't talk a little bit much about this one, but you're sort of talking about it underneath everything. Meaning is sort of like worldview. Um, in like a religious point of view, this is where people get into like theology of like how they understand how the world works and everything. But from the spiritual point of view, it really goes down to kind of the key values or like the basic fundamental truths that you kind of turn to give you hope or faith in despair. And you mentioned it already accidentally when you said that you sort of turn to the institutions where you have faith in medicine, you have faith in the experts, you have faith in the nurses and the doctors, you've got faith in your family and the people to be there and your friends. So like that's where I'm hearing. But do you want to add anything
Mhm.
to that about like what are your maybe core tenant beliefs that provide you that guidance?
Yeah, it's probably a cop out, but I do have a core like faith in community, and like that there are people out there that one care about you, and like it's not just give and take. Like there are people that truly unconditionally love you and will do things for you regardless of like what you've done for them.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say I'm a super religious person. I grew up in a multi-religion household, so my father, Jewish heritage, my mother was a Protestant. So like religious service wise, there wasn't a lot of back and forth there. I was kind of a lot of different things. But like something like in the Jewish faith is community and
Mm.
like just with and something that like I do identify with that particular community, just like getting together, helping, like being a helping hand when one person is suffering, like everybody's suffering, so like let's figure out what we can do to help. So not trying to get too deep into that, but that's might be a little bit where that core belief comes from.
Okay. Yeah, that's really cool. And it explains it also can it's in line with everything that you've said up until this point. So
Mhm.
like I can tell that that's a genuine part of you and your spiritual fitness. The connection that I'm hearing is how you're saying earlier how like you love to make deposits into that, and that, like, you're smiling when I say that, right? It brings you joy, because you're
Mhm.
contributing to your community, you're investing in your community, which is part of sort of like how you, and this is just what I'm hearing. It sounds like it's how you really express the love that you have, but also how you feel loved too. Is this act of giving and service?
Definitely. I definitely agree with everything you just said. Like I said earlier, I think I see myself as a people pleaser, and in my like professional life, personal life,
How
I
about I
like
have a
to,
servant's heart, rather than people pleaser. People pleaser
yeah,
sounds kind of negative. I've got a servant's heart. That
I
sounds
have a
nice.
servant's heart. As I would put professionally, I like to drive as much value as I can to my clients and stakeholders. How about that?
There you go. There you go. That's what I want to hear. Sold. Yeah, man. That servant's heart is a beautiful thing, and it's really what can like enhance a group situation. And by having the servant's heart, it's what gets you there. So with that, then what are some things that you like to do to either improve or restore your spiritual fitness? Thinking along those lines, what do you turn to
Uh,
do? What are your action items that you do to recharge or to increase?
Particularly now that like things are kind of getting into more like a steady state on the home life, finding ways to engage more and build a community outside of the house. So like I've recently joined in a professional network for CFOs in Fort Worth, that all like-minded people, mostly networking. I'd like to get involved with some nonprofits around Fort Worth. I did a lot of volunteering when I was a kid with food pantries. I've done some pro bono nonprofit consulting with some companies across the U.S. So just kind of like seeing what I can do to again provide value, and kind of further build on that community.
My God, Mitch, you are so freaking consistent. It's ridiculous. Oh my gosh. Like, it's just so glaringly obvious. Like, I love it, man. I'm loving this conversation because like it's obvious that like you find the meaning through community and through your role, and like it brings you joy to like love and provide for your friends and family. So no shit, and when it comes to spiritual fitness, that like you're also gonna be a giver and have the servant's heart to the community. Freaking food pantries and volunteer time. Yeah, man. Yes, that's exactly right. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because like I sound like a broken record. You said consistency, and again, broken record's probably the negative way to put that. But
Be nice to
it's
yourself.
something that, yeah, it's something that's, I think like it's just a core piece of me, and something that it was the first thing I thought of when you asked the question. So
And usually it's like that knee-jerk reaction, which is the one to go with. When we start trying to
mhm.
like form an answer and like say what we think is right, that's where we go astray. Uh, well, it which connects to what you said from the very beginning, which is like, you said, I don't really have anything to say. which is ironic because, yeah, you're right. You haven't said anything. You've just said one thing over and over for the last 44 minutes, which is, I like to give. I like to give, I
Yeah.
like to give, I like to give, I like to give, I like to give, I like to give.
On, on the bright side, editing, like you could probably like narrow this down to like a 10-minute like episode. So
Oh no, we're
still get.
including everything from the moment I hit record up until we part ways, because you've offered some helpful things for those who are listening. Like there's this great story about how we can all go through hard things, and we can do more than we realized. And it's usually when we go through the hard things that we realize what resources we have available to us. The hard part in life, of course, is you don't want to start building that boat once the rain starts coming. You need to have that boat built before the floods come. And like that's a classic biblical story for you from Noah's Ark, um, which in your situation, you already had your ark built with your community, and
Mhm.
with that experience. And what you learned yourself from my reflection is that in the same way that you can give to the community, that community can give back to you, and it is uniquely rewarding. Yeah.
Yep, definitely. You said it much more eloquently than I would have.
And that's what I do, and that's why you're the chief financial officer. So, I think maybe to wrap this up for you, Mitch, is that I said this again, and now we've got some more reflection. So perhaps maybe to a future person going through a NICU experience, whether it actually is the NICU, um, what advice or words of encouragement would you give that person?
Biggest words of encouragement is like it will come to an end, no matter how, lost or blurry the time feels. Um, it will cut the time will come to an end. Those big milestones. Every NICU has a list of everything that a baby needs to check off to leave. Your baby will get there. It can be so frustrating, even if it's just bottle feeding. But when they say like it'll click, it'll click. And just talking to your spouse, talking to your community, like leaning on the right people, you will get through it. Because Frank, there were times where I didn't think I would, and I got through it. So if I can do it, anybody can. That's just a fact. So
Mm.
um, all good things will come in time. It's an experience I wouldn't wish on anybody. But you said it earlier, it can happen to anybody at any time, and y- it will come to an end.
It
And
certainly will.
yeah.
And I hate it when people say, well, everything happens for a reason, or, don't worry, something good is going to come out of this, which I think is bullshit. You don't tell someone who's suffering that there's some like divine purpose or plan. That's awful to say. However, what they're
Hmm.
trying to say, but they're saying poorly in a cheap way, um, is no, not something good is not going to come out of this, but um, it's going to reveal within you strengths that you never realized that you had, and that as the result of the suffering, it's going to take you to places that you never knew that you could go. And I'm with you in this, and we are with you in this together as you push this rock up this mountain. We're cheering you on.
Yep,
Right
definitely.
on. Well, man, thank you, Mitch, for your time with spiritual fitness, and for all those listening. I hope you have a good rest of your week, and we'll tune in next week for another great conversation.